Welcome to r/ProRevenge, in which we read stories of normal people turning into heroes thanks to their standing up to jerks and evil bullies who wronged them first. This is the type of story that inspires you, entertains you, infuriates you, angers you, and makes your blood boil with steaming fury, and then boosts your mood after you see how the life of the aggressor is completely and utterly destroyed by someone who righteously fought back. Before we start, I'd like to clarify that my voice is recovering from a bad cough that troubled me for a whole week. Therefore, if I sound worse than usual, there's a reason, and I apologize for that. Without any further ado, let's begin. Story number 1.
Today I fucked up by being an arsehole on the internet and causing a stranger to get divorced. I'm cross-posting this from Today I Fucked Up. I'm really not a mean person and genuinely felt terrible for destroying a marriage, but the lovely users thought I should post here, though I didn't mean for the revenge to go to this level by any means. I don't even know if I'm meant for revenge at all, but here we are. I, a 42-year-old female, fucked up big time today. 2 weeks ago, on a random Thursday morning at like 1 a.m., someone starting for shooting off fireworks in my neighborhood. I've been having bouts of insomnia and was finally able to get to sleep, and I had to get to wake up at 4 a.m. for a meeting 2 hours away that I had to be at for 8 a.m. I was pissed, and so were my dogs. I love fireworks, but think there's a time and a place. Thursday morning at 1 a.m. is not it. I posted to the neighborhood Facebook group a few hours later during a coffee break about people that set off fireworks at 1 a.m. midweek. After I made the long drive home, I checked my Facebook. Some guy comments that I can't sleep because I'm a fat pig. Now I'm chubby but not sloppy fat. Plus, I just lost the equivalent of a fully grown male wombat or 54 North American grey squirrels. So I feel fucking awesome about myself. This is where I may have really fucked up. I respond to the guy, who was maybe mid to late 30s, very early 40s, about the same age group as me. I write in a comment beneath his "Listen guys" name, "I'm sorry I had to end things, but I just didn't have the same feelings. What you're saying now is just hurtful and mean. Please stop sending me messages, and commenting on my Facebook post is just a pathetic way to contact me. I told you a dozen times already, we are done. It's over." The following day I had to get to the airport for an out-of-country vacation that had me getting up early and leaving early as hell. So I don't check my Facebook during all the craziness, also because I'm only on it sparingly. I don't live on my phone, and when I am, I'm usually on Reddit or TikTok versus Facebook. I could not check my Facebook even if I wanted. I was on a cruise, not paying $25 a day for internet, and the country we visited didn't really have the greatest Wi-Fi. Besides, I was having a blast, leaving the chaos of the world behind. I signed on Monday night and fuck. Apparently, people took this seriously and told his wife. She was freaking out on me, pleading me for information, sending me messages. Her and his friends were DMing me. He was DMing me. It was bad. The last message was the guy saying I'm a total cunt because I refused to tell the truth and I just destroyed his life. I immediately messaged both him and his wife explaining what happened. I sent pics of me on vacation even, time-stamped. Apparently, he's a serial cheater, and when I exposed our affair, another woman exposed her affair with the husband to the wife, because the affair partner was jealous that he had hit another side chick. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, because not only of the multiple affairs, but because he humiliated her with how public it was, especially it being a neighborhood group. So there's my accidental ProRevenge. Too long, didn't read. Someone tried to hurt my feelings after I posted about fireworks being set off early morning, and I pretended to publicly address our, in inverted commas, breakup. His wife and affair partner were not pleased.
Story number 2. Stepdad cheats on my mom, so we get revenge. Before we start, allow me to introduce the cast of this wonderful story. Me, I am 24 and I'm a man. My mom is 50. My brother is 23 and my sister is 30. My cheating stepdad is 45 and his name is Chris. Betty is my stepdad's co-worker and she's 25. The other woman, the affair partner, is Darla and she's 40. This may be a long one, therefore apologies in advance. I moved in with my mom after her marriage of 25 years with my bio dad was ended. He was a manipulative asshole, but that's another story. Shortly after the divorce, my mom introduced me to her boyfriend at the time, Chris. Now, my mom worked as a correctional officer at the county jail. The boyfriend was a former inmate, in for a DUI, driving under the influence. That should have been the first red flag, but my mom was grieving a long marriage, and I did not want to push the subject. Chris seemed to make her happy, and that was enough for me. Me, my brother, and my sister all lived in with mom and Chris, and we seemed to get along okay. Chris and I bonded a bit over our love of video games, and all seemed well. That is, until 2017. Due to Chris' prior DUI, he had to go in regularly for probation checkups at the courthouse. One day, he didn't return, and we got a little worried. We then received a phone call from him. From Texas! Turns out, when he arrived at the courthouse that day, he was jumped by the FBI. His family from Texas was implicated on a number of gang and drug-related crimes, and due to a situation where he was in the vehicle during a drug handoff, he was on the hook as well. He ended up agreeing to testify against his family members in exchange for a shorter sentence, and allowed to be out of prison before the trial. My mom was distraught, and over the course of many phone calls, over a year, they worked out their marriage plans when he returned. His store owner at the Dairy Queen he worked at allowed him to come back as well, back to his store manager position. Soon after, the drinking started. Now, obviously, because of his DUI, Chris was clearly no stranger to drinking. He began to drink more and more and more, to the point where he was consuming half a 24-pack of beer a day. Chris was a mean drunk. He regularly started fights when wasted, and while they never got physical, he wasn't exactly kind with his words. My mom enabled his behavior for several years, saying that the stress was getting to him from work and from the upcoming trial. Finally, after several years, my mom had enough. Chris came home extremely drunk one night, and my mom confronted him. She asked him if he had been drinking, and when he didn't deny it, she kicked him out. He went to live with a friend temporarily. The next morning, Mom asked us to help gather a few of his essentials so that he didn't have to re-enter the home until he was sober. While we were gathering his things, we heard a knock on the front door. We opened it to find Betty, one of Chris's co-workers and someone I went to high school with. She told my mom that she had something important to share. After sitting my mom down and telling her not to share where she got the info from, Betty told my mom about how Chris was cheating on my mom with Darla, how he regularly had Darla perform sexual acts in and around his workplace, how Betty had caught them, and how Chris told her that if she ever told my mom, he'd fire her. He was the store manager. And finally, how Darla was pregnant. My mom was angry. After the initial shock wore off, she told us all to round up all of Chris's things and to dump it outside. We took everything out of the house, and tossed it all in the alley behind our house. Chris had no reason or ability to return to the house. It was rented, and only my mom on the paperwork, so no issues there. In the meantime, she called and confronted him. He confessed to the entire affair, and that he was happy Darla was pregnant, because that would mean he would finally have a child of his own. Mom refused to have more kids. The three of us were massive strains on her body, and she likely wouldn't survive anymore. He refused to apologize for any of his actions. My mom arranged for him to collect his items from the alley, with an officer present. And he left our lives. Now, the revenge. Now, my mom clearly wanted to dust her hands off him and move on. She was already quite emotional from the whole ordeal and wanted nothing more from him. But my sister, my brother, and I had other ideas. First, we call his workplace. Dairy Queen operates as an independently owned franchise, and the owner of this branch owned several branches in the area. He was also a good friend. We informed him of the sexual acts being performed on the premises, and he went to the process of getting Chris booted from his position and barred him from any of the branches in the area. Finally, Betty got his position after he left, and now runs a tight and clean ship. Chris no longer had a job or a place to live, and so went to live with Darla in a town about an hour away. We found out that he started working at another Dairy Queen in that town, and we informed the owner of that location of the situation. It took significantly longer, due to there being no current indecent actions occurring there, but eventually he lost that job too. Soon after, Chris began driving around our neighborhood, seemingly stalking my mom and our family, probably because of his job loss. Now, due to the whole situation in Texas, he never had his probation lifted for his DUI, and thus did not have a license. He never had to drive when he lived with us, since work was local, and we could drive him as needed. But here he was, clearly driving around by himself when he shouldn't be. We contacted the police and informed them about Darla's vehicle in our neighborhood, and that we believed that Chris was driving it without a license. We told them to pull over the vehicle next time they see it, as it would likely be Chris driving again. Sure enough, a few weeks later, we were told that Chris indeed was pulled over and sent back to the local jail for driving without a license and while intoxicated. The police also did a search of the home he was staying at and found several guns at the premises. Since he was a felon, he was not legally allowed to have weaponry on the premises, meaning that there was more jail time tacked on. By the time his jail time had finished, It was just in time for him to be sent back to incarceration in Texas for the trial. Chris's son was born while Chris was in prison. Darla evidently realized what an absolute ass Chris was and cut ties with him while he was in prison. During his prison time, Chris started sending tons of letters to my mom, stating how sorry he was, pleading him to take him back, and ranting about how it wasn't his fault. All in the same letter, mind you. Mom burned every one of them. We moved on, moving out of state. Chris evidently got out of prison some years ago and now lives in Kansas, struggling and fighting child support, which Darla sued him for. Mom now has a new boyfriend who treats them right and cares a lot more than Chris ever did. My brother and my sister moved on and out, and I still live with Mom, assisting her with the newly purchased home that we have been renovating. Life's looking okay. I was reminded of this by a chat with a coworker about cheaters, and I thought to post it here for others to enjoy. Story number 3.
Landlord screwed with the wrong tenant for too long. This will be decently long as it needs some context. I'm going to throw in a lot of stuff to make it all easier to understand as well. I'll put an asterisk where the story proper starts, in case anyone wants to skip the preamble. Minor details might not be entirely accurate, as I've no interest in a revival of this conflict on any level. I want completely, and any resurrection can only taint the experience. We'll start off by noting that I spent about 2 decades working in security. During that time, I worked many different types of security in many different locations. The one that matters for this story was the time spent in the rental housing tribunal in a major city as a kind of bailiff. For those not knowing what that is, think a courtroom in a major city anyway, in a smaller town. It'll probably be an event room in a hotel or community center. As you'd see on TV, but with less formality and an adjudicator instead of a judge. They functionally are the same thing to landlords and tenants, but they definitely aren't the same thing. This place exclusively deals with landlord and tenant disputes and is the only place to resolve landlord and tenant disputes. Note that I wasn't a bailiff and it wasn't a court, but these terms most accurately describe the situation and my place in it. For 2 years I worked at the rental housing tribunal. It was early my time in security. I was 18 to 20-ish. Being as it was a major city, the sheer number of cases I sat through was beyond my ability to count. I saw everything there was to see. No one is capable of surprising me with a story because I've seen them all. In detail, as a side duty of mine was to ensure all parties had copies of all evidence being presented. I did a lot of photocopying and always read, inspected everything I copied to ensure nothing got cut off or made illegible. By the time I stopped working there, I probably knew the way everything worked well enough to be an adjudicator myself. Well, not obviously, but I'm certainly in no need of a lawyer either, should I ever have the need to go there. I also had intimate knowledge of how the system worked beyond the actual rules. Like, for example, adjudicators would always give a little leeway to anyone representing themselves over someone who had a lawyer, or how pissed off adjudicators would get when a party was speaking out of turn. Seriously, do not do that. Skip forward almost a decade. I left the city and am in a fairly large town in the same province, same tenant laws. I have a few roommates in a decently sized townhouse. We get along well, but there's a problem. Only I can write checks, and our paydays don't line up. So I'm the one who pays the rent, and I usually can't do it on the first because roommates don't usually all pay in time. We advised the landlord we might be a day or two late, but we'll always have it by the third at the latest. They have no problem with it at all. I spoke to them myself. For about a year, this works fine. No complaints from landlord because even if we're often a day or two late, we always pay. We're also fairly quiet and don't damage the property. Nearly model tenants. I do not actually have any idea why, but one day this changed. I suspect a different person in the company started overseeing the region. One day, suddenly, we got a summons to the Rental Housing Tribunal, hereafter to be referred to as RHT, on the second of the month for failure to pay rent. This doesn't actually lead to a case because we paid the same day. But now we have to pay the application fee the landlord paid in order to serve the summons. I bitched to the neighbor who was also the superintendent and eventually heard back that their contact at the company was now demanding first of the month, no exceptions. Well, that really didn't work for us. So we probably had to pay that fee 15 to 20 times over the next 2 years. I could have gone to the tribunal over it, but we were technically without a leg to stand on, and I knew it. Maybe if I went enough times, I can ding them for harassment, but I don't have time for that, and my roommates don't care. After being split between us, all the fee wasn't enough deterrent to change our behavior, so we accepted it. If this was the only issue, there wouldn't be much story though. At around the same time, the rent leeway vanished. So did mandatory maintenance. I'm not going to list everything that went wrong and wasn't fixed. You'll get a decent idea at the end. We suffered through it. We were all working too many hours at shit pay to be able to actually do anything about it. We adapted. But after about 2 years, it broke. Everyone but me up and moved out for various reasons within a 4-month period. I'm not going into any details on my roommates at all because things kinda exploded for a couple of different reasons outside of this. No reason to dig any of that up. I had been saving up a while and was able to quit my job without having to immediately get another, so I suddenly had a lot of time. I didn't want to stay and pay the rent by myself or have to find new roommates I could live with. And with my experience in the RHT, I knew I had the landlord by the balls. So I went for them. I stopped paying rent. Annoyingly, I didn't get a summons the first month, but I did the second, so I went. With a meticulously documented plethora of evidence of failure to maintain the property and entering the property without formal notice. I had a copy for the landlord and a copy for the adjudicator. I know from experience that technically you're supposed to give the other party the evidence before the tribunal, but I also knew about that leeway an adjudicator gives to those who represent themselves. So I didn't give the landlord the evidence until our case came up. 100% total ambush. They argued they were ambushed, but the adjudicator just dismissed the case, dressed me down a little, and told me to file my own summons as I should have done. This was the petty revenge. The landlord and lawyer drove 3 hours to get there for nothing. Worse than nothing. I filed my own summons, and the big day shows up. It's been about 4 months of me not paying rent at this point. I'm prepared to if I lose, but I don't think I'm going to lose. The whole thing could not have gone better. I had 20 to 30 pages of evidence and 20 odd photographs. They had nothing. They had no actual defense for our water heater being out for 6 months or us not having a fridge for a year, just to mention 2 severe issues. Their entire defense rested on us being late for rent, which actually worked against them once that led to the adjudicator learning how many times we'd paid the application fee, and lies that had no evidence to support them. They even talked over me a few times. and I saw in her eyes the one time I opened my mouth to protest during their turn to speak, but forced myself to shut up with every gram of willpower I had, so only a squeak came out. The adjudicator respected me. He had no respect for the landlord. I had won on every possible front. The only question was how much. It was more than I'd ever seen. I got 9 months of free rent, and the landlord was ordered to have everything fixed before the next month was over, or I'd get more. I gave notice I was leaving at the end of the 8th month, and left at the end of the 9th. Because the landlord had never renewed the lease, I didn't have to give him the 3-month notice the lease specified. If you want a figure to put to it, basically, I got a $13,000 judgment in my favor, adjusted for inflation and rounded. I also made the landlord and lawyer drive 3 hours, twice only to lose. The landlord's face was so red at the end, I thought he'd have a heart attack. He didn't though. By Mark. Editing to clarify a few things based on questions. I also want to add, for those good landlords out there, I do feel you. My time in the RHT was eye-opening. For every bad landlord, there are 10 bad tenants easily. There's a massive debate of debates to have over the whole thing. I'll only say that I do sympathize with the good landlords out there. I'm not trying to paint all landlords as terrible. This is the only landlord I've ever had that was so useless. I've revised my estimate of the ratio based on a little research and some comments from 30 tenants per landlord to 10. I'm probably still wrong, but the sheer number disparity between landlords and tenants effectively requires there be more bad tenants than bad landlords, simply because there are so many more tenants than landlords. I'm going to leave it at that and just beg you not to rip me apart from either side. I'm intimately aware of the problems both good landlords and good tenants face, and my sympathy goes out to both sides.
Story number 4.
Steal furniture? Almost lose your job. So my dad owns a house that he's been renting for some time now. The tenants that lived there were for the most part decent people who my dad thought were trustworthy. They all changed about 2 months into the tenancy when the tenant refused to pay the month's rent. My dad showed some leniency and gave them another month to pay up what was owed. They didn't pay a thing. By this point, my dad, frustrated by the whole situation and being 2 months out of rent money, offered them a deal. Leave the house ASAP and then only pay half the money owed. They countered with a different agreement. They would leave the house in a clean state with all of their furniture left behind as compensation. My dad, wanting to just be done with them, agreed. Cue to when my dad gets to the house, finding the place in a mess, with none of the furniture left behind, including the furniture that belonged to my dad in the first place. The 2 sofas that my dad owned were left behind, but they were trashed and left in the shed. When my dad confronted them, asking for them to pay up the full amount that the furniture was worth, he was met with a promise of payment after 2 weeks, which he didn't believe, and when he requested they pay earlier, he was met with good luck getting your money, followed by laughing emojis. This made my dad angry, and he decided that he wasn't going to let this slide. My dad knew that the tenant was a Christian pastor of a church, and his son also had some job related to the church. My dad contacted the church and explained everything from how they hadn't paid him rent money to stealing the furniture and trashing the place. The church was somewhat interested about this behavior. The next day, my dad gets an angry phone call from the tenant's son, cursing at him and asking him what he thought he was doing, contacting the church, saying he was being unfair. My dad hung up on him only for him to attempt to ring 10 times after he hung up. From what we could piece together, the church had told the pastor that if he didn't settle things with my dad, him and his son would lose their jobs. My dad received the full amount for the furniture that same day and agreed to back off. My dad later said it was never about the money, but the way this guy treated him and his values. My dad, being a Christian himself, was very disappointed.
Story number 5. Revenge on a client who tried to throw me under the bus. I was pushing 40, and I learned a lot of lessons in more than 10 years of legal practice. But one of the most important lessons I learned was from an older lawyer that I worked for as a summer student, after the second year of law school. A lawyer has 3 duties, he told me. First to himself, second to the court, and last, the client. Always make sure you come first and the client comes last. That's what he told me. The reason? Because clients will fuck you, he said. They'll throw you under the bus without thinking twice. I should have stayed with this lawyer, but being young and an idiot, I had to go work downtown, and I'm still downtown now. But fortunately for me, I remember this lesson, and it came in handy many years later when a client really did try to throw me under the bus. My client was this mid-sized company that did this and that and owned things here and there. Not big enough to be listed, but it did have a pretty sizable real estate portfolio. And one day, a building they owned burned to the ground. The company wanted to collect on the insurance, so they told Frank, a veteran salaryman, to deal with it. Frank was close to 30 and thought he knew what he was doing. He didn't need me to help him with the insurance claim, he told me. He had everything under control. Besides, lawyers are expensive. Some guys really get off on not paying legal fees. And Frank was one of those guys who gloated over every penny that he managed not to pay to the lawyers. I dealt with Frank a lot, and he was always nickel and diming me. The insurance is going to fuck you, I told Frank. And it was only by luck that I even knew about the fire and the loss, because Frank had not asked for my help. He just let it slip one day, and since then, I'd kept on top of him, trying to get him to smarten up. I had to fight to get him to send me the proof of loss form to make sure he hadn't messed that up. Frank fucked up, and I wonder sometimes how he had a job. But the proof of loss was okay, at least, so that was one less thing to worry about. You don't know that? You don't know that? He said. I could tell he just wanted to get me off the phone. To that, I reply, I'm paid to know when insurers are trying to screw my clients. And the insurer, it's going to screw you. They've been stringing you along for ages with requests and questions and paperwork. But they aren't going to pay you. Not unless you sue them. But Frank said he knew what he was doing, and that it was all under control. And besides, he got along with the adjuster so great. I continued to tell him, the limitation period expires in 2 weeks. And once the 2 weeks pass, it will be too late to sue. The moment that limitation period expires, they will stop taking your calls. You'll get a final email saying, sorry, you're out of time. And that will be that. Don't leave this till the last minute. Let me sue right now, and you'll have the money in no time. Frank was like, fine, whatever, don't bother me. I got this and blah, blah, blah. And he got off the phone as soon as he could. I sent him the usual email with clear warnings and recommendations, which he ignored. I sent the email again, and then again as the limitation period approached, and again a couple of days before the deadline. I told him, my email said I'm going to be at trial, and you won't be able to reach me. But you have to sue. You have other firms on your list, so pick one and sue. He didn't bother to reply, and I went off to do my trial. The trial lasted a couple of weeks, and no email from Frank. Then a month passed, and another month, still no email. I figured he must have sorted things out. Maybe Frank was right after all, I said to myself, and then the phone rang. It was Frank. Hey, remember that fire insurance thing we spoke about? We had only spoken about it like a dozen times. I figured he was calling up to gloat, so I cut to the chase. So they paid out. That's great, Frank. You were right. He asked me what I was talking about, and could he see a copy of the claim. What claim? I said. The claim against the insurer. You know, that claim. Does that mean the insurer didn't pay? I said. He hung up on me. Then a few minutes later, my computer dinged, and there was Frank's email, talking about how we spoke, and he told me to sue, and he was worried when I hadn't sent him a copy of the claim, and he was following up to get a copy of the claim. I emailed him back, and I said, I emailed him back. I take it that the insurer didn't pay you, just like I told you they wouldn't. And now the limitation period is expired. They told you to jump in the lake, leaving you with a loss in the millions. Is that it? I'd make a mistake by not going over Frank's head when he wouldn't listen to me. But if I had gone over Frank's head, I never would have received another file from him. So I didn't. But that was then, and this was now. So I sent a copy to Frank's boss, and his boss's boss. Plus, I did send the same to Bill, the client's in-house counsel. Bill acknowledged my email right away and called me later that day. Frank messed up, he said. We know that. He's an idiot. So what do we do? So his excuses didn't work? I asked. Nope, Bill replied and explained that they had summoned Frank to boardroom, but his story didn't add up, given all the warnings I'd sent him. Besides, there would have been no reason for him to keep emailing the insurer if he had told me to sue. Once the file goes to legal counsel, Frank's role was over. The company knew Frank was bullshitting them. So that's it then? Bill said. We just lost a couple of $1,000,000. It's okay, I said, explaining that when I realized that Frank was going to fuck up, I issued a claim against the insurer. Because I had made Frank send me the proof of loss a while earlier. I had enough information that I could sue to preserve the cause of action. Not a great claim, and short on details, but good enough. Huh? You sued without instructions? Bill said. Lawyers aren't supposed to sue without instructions because if you do that, you're personally liable for whatever costs the other side incurs. It is a big deal to sue without instructions. Yup, I said. I sued without instructions. I pulled a copy of the claim and I emailed it to him as we spoke. It's a little rough, I said, but we can always amend. Oh, thank God, Bill said. Can I leave it with you? Of course he could. The insurer was a sitting duck, and I knew I'd collect from them, no problem. A few days later, I got a call from another guy who worked for the client, a guy I didn't normally deal with. They had a situation and needed my help. I usually deal with Frank. What's up? I said. What was up was that Frank got called into another meeting, and they handed him a one-page letter. And then he put his little office things in a box, and security walked him past his co-workers to the elevator and escorted him downstairs to the parking lot. Bye-bye, Frank. He was too old to get another job. Or at least, not a decent one. It was a life-changing event for Frank, but for me, he was just an anecdote, a cautionary tale that I tell young lawyers sometimes over beers, maybe too often, because I'm getting on in years and I have my favorite stories. I wasn't trying to get revenge on Frank, not at all. And I would have felt a bit sorry for him if he hadn't been trying to throw me under the bus. But the guy who replaced him was great, and never nickel and dime me. So it was all good. Story number 6. Tricking my slacker co-worker into sabotaging himself. I work in an office with a guy I'll call Seth. Seth is that co-worker everyone knows. Lazy, always passing his work on to someone else, and somehow always getting away with it. He'll sit around on his phone and go to the bathroom every 10 minutes. He's the kind of guy who will show up late, make some lame excuses about traffic, and then disappear for lunch for 2 hours. For the past 6 months, Seth's favorite target has been me. He'll send emails asking if I can help out with a project, but what he really means is do all the work while I take the credit. I complained to my boss a couple times, but somehow Seth always managed to weasel his way out of trouble. The final straw came when he passed off a major report that was due to a client in 2 days, dumping it on me last minute. One day I casually asked him if he was good with Excel, and he admitted he didn't know much about it. Perfect. The next time Seth tried to dump a bunch of spreadsheets on me to organize for his next report, I agreed. But this time I embedded a series of hidden formulas into the documents. These formulas didn't do anything important, just enough to mess with the numbers if someone didn't know how to check for hidden cells. It took me a little time, but I was careful not to make it too obvious. The kicker? Every time Seth tried to copy and paste the data into his report, it would scramble everything just enough to be completely useless. On the day the report was due, Seth slacked off like usual, assuming I had handled it like always. When the client called, furious because the report was filled with nonsense numbers, Seth panicked. He rushed to fix it, but every time he tried to fix one part of the report, something else would break. He came to me, frantic, and asked for help. I acted confused and I said, I don't know what happened. Maybe it's a glitch. I gave him some vague advice and I watched as he spent the entire day trying to salvage his mess. Needless to say, our boss found out, and for once, Seth couldn't talk his way out of it. He got lambasted for screwing up such an important project and was put on temporary leave without pay. I guess he'll be doing his own work from now on. Story number 7. Cheat on your wife with mine. I will burn your life to the ground. This is way back in the early 2000s. I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our 2 kids were about 4 and 6, still young, but not so young they couldn't tell you something about what happened in their day. They started talking a lot about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself. But since they live about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much, and that was basically every day she wasn't working at her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but was never a good liar. So I started tracking the mileage on her car, and sure enough, she was driving extra 400 or so miles per week. I knew some shit was going on. Then one day I sat down at the computer and she had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. I could not resist and logged in to read her emails, and I saw a few email exchanges between her and her college boyfriend, where they discussed how my wife was regularly fucking one of her ex-boyfriends from high school. Not to mention of details about him, other than my wife also talking shit about his wife, making fun of how she had gotten fat after having kids. Anyway, I printed out these email exchanges and I stashed them. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a cop and he suggested I call a guy he knew that had left the force to become a private investigator. Ron, let's call him Ron. Ron was great. I paid his retainer and gave him the details and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report, detailed with photos and times, dates, locations, all about how she would take the kids to her parents, then go meet this guy for lunch, then they would go to a dumpy motel for a few hours, after which she would pick up the kids and return home. At this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other, and the fallout absolutely fucked mine and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what he could about this guy. Ron absolutely came through. I learned his name, Bob, that he was married and had 3 kids. I also found out that he worked as a vice president of sales for his father-in-law's business. At this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report and one more thing I wanted him to do for me. On the same day I had my wife served with the divorce papers at her work, I had Ron meet with this guy's wife and show her everything he'd found out. She seemed nice and I figured that she deserved to know what her dear hubby was up to. What she did with that information was up to her. Well, the information about my wife's infidelity didn't matter in my divorce proceedings. Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to the publicly available court documents from the divorce and other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account, took the kids, and left. As soon as her dad found out what he'd done, Bob was fired, and since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Their divorce was ugly. Lots of fighting in and evidently out of court. Lots of fighting in and evidently out of court. I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to the point that her brother stepped in, and Bob got his nose broken. There were restraining orders. A few more incidents with police reports, criminal charges, jail time, and so on. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days. Last I heard, he had left the state and his ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and took over after he retired. As for me, my ex and I got along well enough. I did not engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids, and now that they are both adults, I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything, but I only care in the context that she's my kids' mom and is important to them. Nothing beyond that. Story number 8.
My ex-mother-in-law sent her church friends to harass my daughters and I. I've now exposed her family to her church community and she's getting shamed and shunned at church. I'm a woman and I'm 46. My daughters, 17 and 15, have a strained relationship with my ex-husband's parents. 78-year-old male and an 80-year-old female. My ex passed away in an accident last year, and we've had some major family drama since due to his cheating and him leaving 2 boys born with his affair partner orphaned. She also died. Part of the drama has been my ex-in-laws trying to get custody of my daughters and them also trying to live with us. First one we're going to court over. Second one will never happen. Where we live, there's a weekend market with fresh produce, eggs, meats, and other products straight from farmers. This week was extra special since it was my youngest birthday. Since her party is later in the month, I decided to give her a budget and set her loose on the market to get whatever she wanted, mostly chocolate and sweets. After an hour, I did start getting worried, and just before I called her, she called me. She was crying, saying some weird people have cornered her. I ran to her with my oldest daughter to find 6 older women berating my daughter for being unchristian, for refusing to spend time with her paternal grandparents, or for wanting to be a good big sister to a poor orphaned baby brothers. My daughters are the ones that found out about my ex cheating and the babies, so they aren't fond of the kids. It's trauma, and they are working with a therapist. I got between the group and my daughter, telling my eldest to go pay the stuff her sister had and to go to the car. Then I turned to the woman, some who I knew from when we went to my ex-in-law's church, and ripped them a new one. They told me I was worst for refusing to obey my ex-in-laws, like a good Christian wife. Bath. Eventually, the screaming turned too loud and we were all asked to leave the market. I met with my girls in the car, the women following me like a group of vultures. I managed to get in the car and drove away. After my girls went to bed, I got online to talk to another member of that church that I'm in good terms. I told him about what happened, and after he apologized, he told me what was going on. My ex-mother-in-law posted this massive story in the church's Facebook group about how horrible my daughters and I are. How we are leaving them homeless and penniless. They inherited my ex's personal bank account and his life insurance. And how my daughters don't even talk to them. She also accused us of being the reason she lost her grandson. The boys are now living with distant relatives of my ex-husband. Basically, it was a sob story worthy of a Hallmark movie. And of course, they were getting all the love and support from the more extremist members of their church. This church and its members are a bit annoying, especially with LGBTQ plus topics, but they have a small saving grace. They are incredibly strict about cheating. It's a big no-no, be it from a husband or a wife equally. Now, how did she get around blaming me about fair children without exposing the cheating? She claimed the other woman was our surrogate since I was unable to have more children. Then said I didn't want the babies because they were boys, which is absolutely disgusting to be accused of. Well, I decided it was time to clean up this mess, and since I was mid-divorce when my ex died, I had all the evidence needed. And since the divorce wasn't completed, I don't have any legal ramification for releasing all the evidence. I was off the next day and went to a print shop to get copies of all the delightful pictures of my ex cheating, his text conversations with his affair partner, the ones with his parents confessing to his cheating and getting support from them. My ex-in-laws harassing me about the divorce and my coup de grace, all the emails and text messages of them bullying my daughters about their baby brothers. In one of them, they call my daughters bastards and telling them it was their fault for their father died since they told me about the affair and I began the divorce. This one was literally 2 days after my ex died. I paid extra for all of this to be printed in beautiful high-quality paper. Then when I got home, I sat down for hours to make delightfully personalized binders. They look like the little prayer song packets the church give for everyone to take to sing hymns. The first picture when opening the binders is my ex and his side woman making out in our living room. Their faces are easy to discern and the girl looks nothing like me. Different skin tones and hair color. Underneath I wrote ex-husband's name and affair girl's name, love story. I took them to the church before service. There's a desk in the back with the songbooks for people that need or forget their own, and they never check them. The gossip mill was quick and harsh. The names my ex and his affair partner got called in the Facebook were so bad the boss himself had to get involved just to keep things relatively PG-13. People were angry at my ex-in-laws for their abuse to my daughters. But what made me laugh was that I was still in the wrong for the divorce, but it is understandable that I failed on my duties after the shock, and I possibly will one day return to the light, unlike my cheating husband and his Jezebel. They used another word I can't use here, I imagine. I got 2 apology letters in the mail for my girl and an invitation to join the church for support. As for my ex-in-laws, they got shamed into leaving the church. My ex-mother-in-law made a post on a wall about how alienated she feels and how no one cares for the elderly anymore, how she wished her great son was still alive, since he would have taken care of her and her husband. With that, what money? I don't know, since I was the breadwinner. Explanation on the will. My ex-husband had a will that named his parents as beneficiaries. As far as I was aware, he had told me he had named our daughters, not them. I never pushed for me to be the beneficiary, as my own will has my daughters as the beneficiaries, not him.
Story number 9.
Make fun of my mental health. Good luck getting to college. Let me start off by saying that I ain't a man, and I was in my junior year of high school when this happened. This happened when I was 18 years old. I'm not going to get into it, but I ended up in the mental hospital for suicide. I lost one of the only family members who accepted me for being gay. The only extracurricular I had was theater. The theater director treated me like the mom I never had until it came to shows, at which point everyone was told how worthless we were. Not to mention, I had been bullied recently, being gay, and in Oklahoma of all places. I came back from the hospital medicated and ready to finish high school. Some background. I had spent my whole high school career trying to become the president of drama club. I was the only one to become inducted as a thespian as a freshman. I was practically ready to be the next president. The votes came in and I lost. I would have been okay losing to my band. Fake name. Until I found out that they had been telling everyone that I was unstable and told people I went to the mental hospital for drug abuse. I have never abused drugs or done any drugs for the matter. What's worst? When I confronted my theater teacher about it, she told me everyone has a right to free speech, and then proceeded to tell me that maybe I shouldn't have even reached out for help since this would have prevented my loss of the presidential race. Not to mention, I had police in my car, my locker, and even my house. My parents thought I was a myth or something since police kept coming to my house. At the first police visit, they quietly busted down our front door. I even got beat up in the parking lot of my work because a non-druggie didn't believe that I didn't have anything on me. I almost got fired from my one source of income because of this ordeal. All because he made up this lie, and everyone believed it and went talking. I was fuming and found out the top 10 colleges for this band and emailed in all the screenshots of what he said about me. His plan was to go to mostly liberal arts colleges and had even received thousands in scholarship money. All of them rescinded their acceptance when they received the proof. Correspondence was very slow between me and the colleges. It took them forever to confirm that these screenshots weren't doctory in any way. But the application deadlines had passed. He hasn't been able to get into college. I feel slightly bad as I find out his mom was a special teacher, and here it is actually told me Ben that when he turns 18 he will need to find a place to live on his own. He has nowhere to live and no future plans. Don't make fun of people's mental health or make up lives for the purpose of winning. I haven't talked to anyone in the theater group since all of them considered me a druggie, and I became a pariah. I feel a little remorse, but not enough